Today's three craft projects are dollar store Christmas crafts that were inspired by some items that I saw online from Pottery. I started with a sheet of white foam board from the Dollar Tree. Then I used my Cricut to cut a stencil from temporary stencil adhesive vinyl that says Ski Lodge. I weeded out the excess vinyl and then I just measured where to cut the white foam board. I needed a straight edge to cut my foam board and I didn't have anything else handy, so I just grabbed this wooden sign to use as a guide for my blade as I scored the board. I love using my pen blade for projects like this and I'll link to it below. Once the foam board had an initial scoring line, I repeated that same cut a few more times with my pen blade until I could bend the foam board and it would easily pop in half. Then I just had to run my pen blade across the other side of the board to separate. I measured 2-inch sections of the foam board to serve as the frame of my sign, and then I set them aside. Now it was time to paint my letters. I used transfer vinyl to transfer my adhesive letters to the foam board. I was afraid that all this vinyl would damage the foam board when I had to peel it away, so I used a microfiber cloth to make the adhesive a little bit less tacky. I just kind of pressed up and down with a dry cloth. Make sure it's a dry, not wet, just a dry cloth, to leave some fibers behind to take a little bit of that extra stickiness off the vinyl. Then I used masking tape to tape off an arrow. In hindsight, I probably should have done this with my vinyl and my Cricut. It took a little bit of finagling to get the arrow lined up the way that I liked it. I also used the masking tape to tape off a border around the sign. I used my go-to paint from Walmart, which is Waverly Chalk Paint. For this one I combined two colors. The green is called Fern, but it was a little bit too bright for my liking, so I added a bit of gray color called Steel to deepen the tone just a little bit. I used a wide flat brush to cover the sign. I didn't go for complete coverage since I wanted a bit more of a distress technique. Don't wait for the paint to completely dry so that you can get clean lines when you peel away the vinyl. Then things got a bit tricky. I grabbed this wood grain contact paper at the Dollar Tree to wrap my 4 pieces of foam board for the frame. The way that I did it here was I wrapped one long foam board piece. Then without cutting the contact paper, I continued that piece over the back of the sign and then around my other long piece on the other side. And then I just had to wrap my 2 short pieces of foam board with the contact paper. After that, I secured all the frame pieces firmly in place with hot glue and my hot glue gun, and this way I had the back of my sign covered as well, because for me it's really important that the backs of my signs look nice too. And so for about $2 in supplies, I was able to recreate a winter sign that retails for close to $100. Next up, I made these little potted poinsettias. Grab a bunch of red poinsettias at the craft store. I think I bought these on sale for about $4 or $5. Pottery Barn flowers that inspired me were a bit more pink than red, so I grabbed my white Waverly chalk paint and a brush. After cutting my bunch of flowers apart, I took the white paint on a very dry brush and I lightly painted the edges of each flower petal. I just went back and forth quickly using very little white paint on my brush at a time. It's okay to get the paint on the whole petal, you just want to focus on getting more paint around the edges than in the center of each petal. Then I grabbed some foam blocks from the Dollar Tree and 2 small clay pots that you can get at your craft store for about $1 each. Cut the foam block down to size, in this case I cut it in half, then stuff the foam into the clay pot. Next it's time to cover the clay pot with burlap, but since burlap is pretty see-through, you either need to paint the clay pot or cover it with a thicker fabric underneath. I always keep scraps of both burlap and drop cloth around, so I went with drop cloth fabric on this one. Just cut a small square of drop cloth and tuck the edges into the clay pot. It doesn't need to be perfect since it will be covered with burlap after. Then cut a larger piece of burlap to place under the clay pot. After placing your poinsettia stem into the foam, wrap the burlap edges around your stem, and then I just ended up using a string from the burlap to tie a simple bow to hold the burlap in place around the clay pot. You could also trim the burlap if needed to get it to hang evenly around your pot, but that's it. I made 2 of these to place on either side of my mantle this Christmas season. Finally, I could not resist these little Dollar Tree Christmas trees. They're pretty basic, but with a few craft supplies, I gave them a whole new look. Start with a small Christmas tree, discard the base, then grab some plain white spray paint and give the whole tree a light dusting with the paint. This will just give the tree a bit of a flocked look. While you're at it, go ahead and grab a Dollar Tree green wreath and give it a spray with the white paint as well. You will need that wreath later. For the base of my tree, I repurposed a painted clay pot from my fall dollar store pumpkin topiary craft, which I will link to below. I just painted the pot with gray chalk paint and I wrapped it with a piece of dollar store rope. Grab some dollar store foam and place 2 blocks inside the clay pot. This will hold your tree in place without having to use the tree base that it comes with. Then grab some garland from the craft store. I bought this 5-footer for about $7 and then I cut it in half. I only needed half of the garland per tree. You'll also need something to cover the base of the tree and all of that ugly foam. For this, I used a dollar store wreath that I folded over itself once to make a double loop. Once it was lightly sprayed with white spray paint, it sat nicely underneath the tree, helping to hold the tree in place and cover all of that foam. Dollars to make. So there you have it. 3 new Pottery Barn inspired dollar store Christmas crafts to decorate my mantle. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give me a thumbs up and click the subscribe button below. Until next time, happy making!